Hello and welcome to episode 430 of the Thinking LSAT podcast. I'm Ben Olson and with me is Nathan Fox. We're the co-founders of LSATdemon.com and the LSAT Demon Daily podcast. You can be LSAT famous, share news, and ask questions on our website. That's thinkinglsat.com. I'm about to invite people to send us a voice recording, but has anyone ever done that?
Well, I don't know. We'll find out, I guess, when we get down to, and yeah, I don't think there's any items on today's agenda. So anybody who wants to shortcut the line to ask us a question, the voice recording is a really good way to do that.
Yeah. Are you nervous about hearing your voice on a podcast? I wonder why people are resistant to this method. Maybe writing an email is just easier, but
I think people do hate hate recordings of their voices unless they've gotten used to it. Did you have that issue when we started the podcast?
I think so. Yeah, I think I didn't like it. But what I've been surprised by is, first of all, I don't listen to myself that often, but when I do hear myself, it still surprises me. I know it's going to be different, but it sounds different.
That's interesting. I think my brain has gotten over that. I remember like having a tape recorder as a kid, just like a super old school, huge, big, bulky, just cassette tape recorder.
Okay. Yeah.
And I remember as a little kid recording myself and then playing it back and being like horrified at how different my voice sounded on the recording than how it sounds in my head.
Yeah.
But then after doing, I think this podcast is what really got me over it. That and recording, thousands of LSAT videos, I guess. But I got so used to hearing my own voice on that stuff that now it just sounds like me. It's weird. It doesn't but it used to be such a dramatic disconnect. And now it's like, I got used, it's like how you get used to drinking coffee, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Apparently on Monday, December 11th at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern, I'm doing a free class. That's going to be a logical reasoning class, which is great because that's the direction the LSAT is heading even more, right? Starting in August of 2024, the LSAT will have twice as much logical reasoning as it does now when the games go away. But anyways, you can sign up for that at lsat.link/free.
I'm glad. Honestly,
yeah.
I think it works in our favor. I think that we are the very best at teaching how to do logical reasoning, for sure. I don't think there's much question there because we make logical reasoning so fun and so easy if you just learn how to attack the arguments, instead of doing such a heavy-handed, technical approach of question type first and all that shit. It's like, God, it's so confusing if you do it that way. And now there's just gonna be, starting in August of 2024 anyway, there's going to be this huge opportunity for people who are going to really crush the logical reasoning. Yeah. And it is possible. People do get to -0 on the logical reasoning. They get to a point where they're just not going to miss questions on LR. So we can get you there and it can be fun and easy to do it, but it's going to be, the new LSAT's going to be it's going to kind of hardcore in a way, right? It's like, you're not going to hide from a weakness in logical reasoning. That's not, now today you kind of can, because it's like, oh, well, if I just ace the games, then, it's only one scored section of LR. But we're going to a world where those short arguments are just going to destroy you if you don't figure out how simple the game really is. Right.
Yeah.
So cool. That's a free class for everybody. How do they register for that?
lsat.link/free. You just need a Demon Free account and you can join.
Awesome.
Yeah. So this podcast is going to air on Monday, November 27th. And then 2 days later on Wednesday, November 23rd, 2023, the November scores are going to be released. We want to know how you did. If you did well, great. If you did poorly, great. Just let us know. The next day, the January 2024 registration deadline is that Thursday. So
the next day, that Thursday. So you have 1 day to decide based on your November score. Yeah. I mean, I can give most people I'll give you a little peek into your future.
Sure.
Every time scores come out, we get a big influx of new students come to us. They wait to see their shitty score that they got after, not prepping or whatever. They knew they weren't ready. They
Yep.
took the test anyway. They got a
Yep.
score that isn't as good as they are capable of, and they know it. And so then they sign up. So I know that's happened like literally every score release day ever. So, you know, I think people know they kind of like hold out hope, like waiting for that score. But then, yeah, they they realize, oh shit, I got to get some help.
Yeah, it's interesting too, because even if you do well, right? If your practice scores indicated you could have done better or higher, it almost always makes sense to try again.
There's just no downside to it. I mean, it costs $215 to take the test, which is not nothing. And it takes you half of a Saturday or whatever to take the test. And yeah, you have to spend some time and effort studying. But for the people who are cut out for this, like the people who are going to be successful in a legal career, spending a couple months making this a priority in your life, you know, that's just the tip of the iceberg as far as sacrifices that you're going to make for your legal career. Yeah. Don't know where I was going with that, but we will be happy we will welcome people in with open arms on, you know, November 29th when they get their score back.
Yeah. Well, and here's something to just keep in mind. Like it's hard to give advice to lots and lots of people because everyone's situation is slightly different. But if you're struggling to figure out what to do when this score comes out on November 29th, just keep in mind that the presumption is that you're going to take it again in January. You probably should take it again. You're probably one of those people who should take it again. And then it's really like if you do so well that you're done, then you decide not to take it. You're opting out of the test process, not into it.
Well, and if you really want to do it our way, every time you register for an official LSAT, you're also going to be pretty much planning on taking the next one.
Exactly.
Because we really want to treat these tests like they're just another practice test, which is not possible if you think it's the last LSAT you're ever going to take.
Yeah.
You know, it's so hard not to put all your eggs in that one basket and, you know, build it up to this big stressful experience. And you shoot yourself in the foot by doing that. So if you really want to do it our way, you know, like to go back in time, the people who took the November test, they would have already been planning on taking it in January. And they didn't necessarily have to sign up because the scores do come out the day before the sign up. But man, if you were happy with your practice test scores before the November test, which you should be if you were taking the November test, otherwise you just don't take the November test. But if you thought you were ready to take the November test, then you should also be thinking, okay, I'm going to take the January test, you know, unless I knock it way out of the park on the November test. Okay. Anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, let's jump in. We have an Ask Button question. This is coming from someone who's using the daemon, and everyone who has access to the daemon can click on the Ask button and ask our Ask team, headed by Abigail, any question they want with what they just worked on. And this person wrote in a question after doing test 73, passage 1, question 6. Specifically, they had a question about answer choice D. Do you want to read that answer?
Well, the question says, how do you deal with not knowing what a word means? I tried to use context clues to understand the word enumerates, but I thought it meant to explain. Any advice? Well, yeah. I mean, you're ignoring the root of the word itself there. I mean, you're not like that word. I feel like you could just, if I made you sit there with the word enumerate, you know, and I like said, hey, does that remind you of any other words? Is there like a piece of a word there that might give you a clue as to what this means? Let me see if I can also get it from context somehow. The question is saying, so it's a reading comp question, and the question is saying, which one of the following most accurately and completely describes the function of the second paragraph of the passage? So what was going on in the second passage You know, and I would have to read that, or sorry, in the second paragraph, I would have to read that. I would have read the whole passage, and I would have looked back at the second paragraph, and I would have said, in my own words, well, here's basically what's going on. Then I would have tried to answer the question. I'm just looking at the chosen answers. D is the second most common answer that people choose. It's a wrong answer.
Wow. And it looks like they choose it almost as frequently as the correct answer. That's a pretty close competitor. Yep.
Yeah. We have lots of full explanations, by the way, built into the daemon. There's a video from you, Ben, from March of 2020. That might be like the last time you were ever in a live LSAT classroom. That looks like you were in a live LSAT classroom.
I was. Yeah,
March 9th of 2020.
Yeah. Huh.
Wearing your Liverpool FC shirt. But that video has 67 upvotes. So that's obviously a very good explanation. We've also got a written explanation with 28 upvotes and a couple more videos, one from me, one from you. So we've got lots of different explanations to get through the full meaning of that question. But I don't know. What do you want to take a crack at? What would you do if you encountered D? D says it enumerates the arguments for the strict constructionist position that are rebutted in the paragraphs that follow.
If I came across this answer choice and I saw the word enumerates and I didn't know what it meant, I would, of course, read the whole answer choice, because answer choices can be eliminated for multiple reasons, right? So there's trying to understand what the word itself means, but when it comes to an answer choice, you don't necessarily need to understand that word to get rid of it. There could be other things about the answer choice that you don't like, and then you can move on. In this particular case, enumerates has the word numerate in it, right? Which sounds like number. You could probably guess. So anyways, the point is try to figure out what the word means based on context, based on the words inside of it, right? The base words.
Yeah. And by the way, the definition of enumerates is to mention a number of things one by one. So if you were gonna, if I were to enumerate all the bad shots that I hit over the weekend playing golf with my buddies, it would be a long list of bad shots. It would take a while for me to enumerate all of them, but it would be to go through one by one and spell them out.
Yep. A very common construction for that sort of conversation would be, well, first I did this, and then I did this, and third I did this, right? Not that you have to literally use numbers, but you are going and listing out the arguments one by one. And so if that didn't happen, that makes the answer wrong. The thing here is, look, you have to try to figure out the word based on context. You have to try to figure out what the word means based on the base words inside of it. You have to look to other parts of that answer choice. If there's anything else that's wrong with it, you can get rid of it.
Which there is here.
Move on.
I mean, so the correspondent says, I tried to use context clues to understand enumerates, but I thought it meant to explain. But, I'm looking at the written explanation, and the written explanation for D says, this paragraph doesn't describe the strict constructionist's argument. So explain, describe, even if it does say explain there instead of enumerates, if it literally said explain, it would still be wrong. Because that's not what it does. It doesn't enumerate the arguments for the strict constructionist position. The next answer, E, turns out to be right. It explains the ramifications of the strict constructionist claims. And that's a big difference. So it's not actually the enumerates versus explains that makes D wrong and makes E right. It's the rest of that. It's totally different to enumerate the arguments for a position. That's one thing. Or to explain the arguments for a position. That's one thing. But explaining the ramifications of a position is a totally different thing. It's like, well, if you believe that, then these are the consequences of that thing. So it's not like D is about explaining the actual arguments themselves. E is about explaining the consequences of those beliefs.
Well,
And that's the
technically,
difference here between D and E.
Yeah.
So it enumerates actually has nothing to do with it.
nothing to do with it. Now, you said D is about explaining the arguments. If you enumerate them, you don't even have to explain them. You just have to list them, right? So it's even worse than that. But your point, which is 100% accurate, is that changing enumerates to explains doesn't change anything here because there's still a significant difference between the two. And that's where people need to dig further, right? You get an answer choice wrong. You need to stop stopping. You need to stop stopping at the first difference you see and say, oh, okay, yeah, well, I see. They said enumerates and this one says explains. It's like,
totally.
No,
I'm sure
there's a
that
whole
people
bunch
are
of
making
other
that
shit.
distinction.
Yeah.
Right. The reason why D gets chosen as often as E does is because people are like, well, was it enumerating or was it explaining?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, wait a second. I want to share a tip from LSAT Demon teacher Ala, who students rave about Ala. And one of the tips that she says all the time in her reading comprehension class is that you just put the word something. There's a word there that you don't know. So just put something or thing. You know, here it's clearly a verb. So you would have to make it.
Yeah, it does.
It somethings, right. But if you read D, it somethings the arguments for the strict constructionist position. Okay, so is that happening? Is it doing is it
doing something for this? Yeah.
Right. Is it doing something for those, for those arguments? Is it laying out the arguments? I don't know. Now I'm putting in laying out or enumerates, but it somethings the arguments for the position versus E. If you take explains out and again, put something in there, it somethings the ramifications of the strict constructionist claims. And that's really the difference between the meaning of those two answers. And it makes D clearly wrong.
Well, there could be other differences, by the way, right? Like we're looking at that difference and that's a significant difference, but there could be even more later in the answer choice.
Well, yeah, like D goes on to say that are rebutted in the paragraphs that follow. So is that really what's happening? That there were arguments for the position in the second paragraph, and then there are arguments against that position in the later paragraphs?
Yeah.
Because E says, well, actually, it was talking about the ramifications of their claims. Like, here's what happens if you believe this thing. And then clarifies the relevance of evidence offered in subsequent paragraphs, which is very vague. It's hard to understand what clarify the relevance really means. But yeah, there are multiple differences there. And there are many, like I shouldn't say most. Many wrong answers have multiple reasons why they're wrong.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's almost, it's like almost always the case. People get intimidated by a word and then they get like locked into they don't understand that word.
Yeah.
And then they just ignore the rest of the answer that they do understand. And there were ways to eliminate D, even if you didn't know what enumerate means. Yeah, there are multiple reasons why these wrong answers are wrong. And it was the rest of the words in E that made it right. And it's the rest of the words in D that make it wrong. So I guess I just want to say one more thing, which is don't pick answers you don't understand. I mean, unless you can conclusively eliminate the 4 wrong answers, you really can't go picking an answer that includes a word that you don't understand.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so I don't know how people are settling on D because it's the rest of the words in D that make it wrong.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, are people getting so caught up in the difference between enumerates and explains that they
probably
pick the
are
wrong
actually.
answer? Yeah.
Right. Because it's like, I wonder if it's similar to what happens in political debates, right? There are complex policy issues that our country faces, but they're complex. So you don't want to argue over them. So what you do is you shift the debate to something easier to understand. And maybe that happens between answer choices, right? There's something a little more nuanced or difficult about one answer choice versus the other, but that's hard to like unpack. So instead you zero in on something easier, like the difference between enumerates and explains. I don't know.
Yeah, which turns out to just not even be the deciding factor here at all.
Yeah. I mean,
totally.
it sounds like enumerates is a problem, but there are other problems as well. One other thing I wanted to say here is that when you're done and you did this, whoever sent in this ask button question, you need to look up the words, and you need to start looking up words not only when you're studying for the LSAT, but just everywhere, right? Just become more versed in more words.
Daily use. I mean, constant. We have this new feature on the podcast called Word of the Week, and we're about to get to one from producer Eric. But yeah, I could have put 20 words on this list during the week. Anytime I'm reading a book, which ideally I'm reading a book every day, I have my Kindle by my bed and I try to read before I go to sleep. And so I'm, I was on planes yesterday and I read the whole way on both flights. And no, I'm just like constantly clicking words on my Kindle.
Yeah.
To get to just, sharpen my tools. I use words for a living. And you as a future lawyer are going to be using words for a living with even higher stakes than I do. So yeah, like if I'm looking up words and if Ben's looking up words and if producer Eric is looking up words, by the way, Eric is a teacher for us. He scored 170 whatever on the official LSAT but he's still looking up words. Then yeah, I would think pretty much every listener should be doing the same thing. Want to get to this word of the week from Eric?
Yeah, certainly. So Eric writes, I recently had to look up the word upbraid. He heard it in a podcast. While joking around, one of the hosts said something like, I was worried that I'd have to upbraid you for your behavior.
I can get that there from context, right? If we replace upbraid with just something.
Yep.
I was worried that I would have to something you for your behavior.
Yeah. Would you be worried about praising someone for their behavior?
I guess you could be worried that you would have to like if upbraid meant compensate, pay, then I can see how you could be worried that you would have to pay somebody. But probably when you read the sentences surrounding, or here, if you were listening on a podcast, if you heard someone say whatever they had been talking about, and then someone chimes in with, I was worried that I was going to have to upbraid you for your behavior. Well, what was that behavior? Was it something that was worthy of praise, or was it something that was worthy of condemnation? When Eric looked up the word upbraid, he saw that it meant to criticize severely or to reproach severely. So it's either to find fault with or to scold.
Yep.
And that's what upbraid means. I would be willing to make a small wager that upbraid might have something to do with corporal punishment.
What does the word braid mean?
Well, braid makes me think of like a rope.
Okay.
Makes me think of like a whip.
Okay.
Or a cat of nine tails, or I don't know. Maybe I, watched too much Game of Thrones or something, but it seems to me that probably has some kind of etymology in, like, if you're gonna, you're gonna severely criticize or reproach or punish. I'd be kind of surprised. And if not, then it's just one of those like little happy coincidences in the English language.
Okay, so I just looked this up out of curiosity. It says the word upbraid comes from the Old English word abregden. I probably saying that wrong, which literally means bring up quickly.
Huh. Okay, yeah, so I could be totally wrong about my whipping skepticism. Maybe I do watch too much.
Anyways, it does mean to reprimand.
To find fault with, yeah. And really, that's not, did you ever learn that word? Do you remember, did you study that word in a vocabulary class? Because I'm betting that you knew what that word meant.
Yeah, but where? I have no clue.
But that's the thing, is that when you just read, then you don't, it's not like memorizing a list of vocabulary words.
It's probably the same as training an LLM model, right? Or an LLM, right? It doesn't know where it's getting its information, but it knows that's the next most logical word. Yeah.
And we use words all the time. I'm sure that I misspeak 100 times per podcast. Like, I know that I don't use every word exactly the right way. I'm just kind of spitting out the word that sounds good, just like a large language model does, right? It's like, well, this seems like it fits in with the context here. I've heard other people use that word in this context, so maybe I'll just use upbraid this time instead of scold. And you're going to naturally get that from reading and writing in English, immersing yourself in the English language. And if you are English as a second language, I would strongly encourage you to like try to do immersion in English as much as possible, because I do not think that watching your native language, TV shows or whatever, like it's not developing, certainly not helping you with your English mastery.
Sure. Yeah.
And you might naturally be getting some if you were reading or even watching TV in English. You're going to get more and more and more of the words in context.
Yeah. Excellent.
But looking up words is just like a superpower almost. I mean, if you do it, your vocabulary will be constantly getting better. Yeah.
And on that note, if you do come across words this week and you want to share them with the podcast, send them in. And don't worry if you feel like it's a word you quote should have known. You didn't. Or you didn't know as well as you could have. And that means other people probably don't know it as well.
Yeah, so we're here to learn, and we're here, and we're teachers. We're like our whole thing. I say it constantly in my classes that I want you to ask questions. I just want you to tell me the stuff that you don't understand. And, maybe it's a little embarrassing or a little humbling or whatever, but as a teacher, that's all I really ever want is for people to ask questions. So if you want to share a word that you didn't know, but then you looked it up and you think it's a cool word, absolutely. Go find us at Thinking LSAT and let us know.
Cool. Okay. The next section we have here is pearls versus turds. Eric supplied an article apparently called How to Align Your LSAT Prep with Law School Specializations for Career Success.
The fuck are you talking about?
Wild.
That idea is just insane. Who is Janice Ruiz? The idea that you're going to be aligning your LSAT prep with law school specializations, which are just marketing garbage. I mean, like law schools that tell you that they're at the forefront of, space law or whatever.
Yeah.
It's like, no, you're not. Stanford is at the frontier of space law and every other kind of law. Like Harvard, Stanford, Yale. Yes, they are there.
Yeah.
To the extent that there is such a thing as, I don't know, what's another fantasy area of law that law schools like to talk about their specialization in?
Or not necessarily, they don't have to be fantasy, right? They can just be like environmental law or international law or
intellectual property law or whatever.
Yeah.
But when it's like the University of San Francisco, ranked 100th in the country or whatever they are, and they're like, well, look, we're 11th in the country for intellectual property. And it's like, no, you're not. You're not actually, because there are so many schools that are just way higher ranked than you overall. And if you want to be an intellectual property lawyer, even if UC Berkeley does not have an intellectual property program at all, UC Berkeley is still a better school to go to for IP than, University of San Francisco or some other just regional law school.
Yeah.
And so focusing on these dumb specializations, it's like you're just getting yourself like you're falling into the marketing trap. You're going to go to some school because of some dumb, it's basically a glossy brochure and 2 electives, and then they're going to rise to 12th on the US News list for some weird little specialization.
Yeah. So, and what you're talking about there is choosing a school based on that specialization. This person is suggesting you align your LSAT prep with those specializations.
Hard to see how that makes any sense. Let's see. When preparing, I'm going to read from the top of this thing. When preparing for a legal career, aligning your LSAT prep with your long-term goals and the specific area of law you want to specialize in is crucial.
Whoa. Crucial. Required.
Yeah, I'm going to look up crucial. Did you just look it up?
No.
Crucial, decisive, or critical, especially in the success or failure of something. An example would be negotiations were at a crucial stage. The thesaurus says crucial means pivotal, critical, key, decisive, deciding, determining.
Settling. Wow. Significant. Okay.
I mean, I've been doing this for 15 years and I've never once thought that it's never even crossed my mind that aligning your LSAT prep with law school specializations. What?
Wow, Nathan, this is what we've been missing.
Yeah, really. I mean, hey, that's one possibility that I've just been clueless for 15 years, or this is complete garbage. It goes on. Specialization in law can significantly shape your career path. Yeah. What's that have to do with LSAT? By focusing your LSAT study on your chosen specialty, you increase your chances of excelling in the exam and lay a solid foundation for your future in the legal field. What?
How do you focus on environmental law as you study for the LSAT?
Okay, so second paragraph talks about law school specializations. It says law school specializations are like choosing a major in college. They focus your studies on a particular area of law. Well, I guess, but also law school is not nearly as customizable as undergrad is.
No way. Not even close. And
you
all
have to
this
take all the exact same 1L classes. You don't even get to specialize in your 1L year at all. And that's 1 out of 3 years. I mean, undergrad, you can take completely different classes from day one based on a different major. Like some people are going to take the hard calculus and some people aren't going to take math at all. That's a very different college experience. Law school, no such thing happens.
Well, also, when you think of it a major, you're taking loads and loads of credits, lots and lots of classes to become more specialized in that major. If you want to specialize in anything in law school, maybe you're taking, 2 or 3 extra classes in your last 2 years.
Maybe. And even in your second year, you're going to be like, you probably are taking evidence during your second year. You're probably trying to get into evidence during your second year, during your first semester of your second year. And then you're going to find out the evidence is impacted at the school that you're going to. And they're not going to be able to give you evidence until the second semester of your second year, or maybe even sometime in your third year is when they're going to finally be able to give you evidence, which you're going to find out to your dismay that you needed evidence in order to be able to qualify for certain summer jobs and clinics and different things. And it's just a fucking scam. But
read this advice here, actually, because people are going to be thinking about this when they go into law school. And I want to say what my professor said to me, not that they're right, but almost literally the opposite of this. For example, here, I'll go ahead and read it. If you're passionate about protecting the environment, you might choose environmental law. If you're interested in business, corporate law could be your path. Okay, it's not actually a path. You would just take corporate law related classes to the extent that they offer them.
Also, it is kind of the main path of law school.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, that's like all big law lawyers. Like corporate law is that's where you're going if you want to make money as a lawyer.
Wow, this is so bad. Listen to this sentence. Or if you love creativity and innovation, intellectual property law might suit you.
What?
And yeah, you also need a technical degree before you even get into law school. But anyway,
there was nothing. I took IP law in law school and it was it's not about creativity and innovation. Are you kidding me? It's about like learning about trade secret law so that you can file a lawsuit on behalf of Apple against Samsung or what. It's not creativity and innovation. My God. Okay.
So what's interesting about this is that when I was in law school, at least, and I don't know whether this advice was good or bad, but the professors I talked to said, hey, if you think that you're likely to go into corporate law or whatever it is that you think you're likely going to do once you leave law school, I would encourage you to take classes unrelated to that path for two reasons. One, you may discover that there's something else that you're interested in. And two, even if you do pursue the path that you are interested in now, you can start to see how a lot of legal areas actually overlap and borrow concepts from different areas of the law. I was like, okay. In other words, get out there and experience things that you won't experience if you go into a firm and then find yourself in a particular practice group and therefore somewhat pigeonholed into an area of law and never get exposed to other things. It made total sense to me because what you end up studying in law school largely does not matter. It's your grades that matter.
Yeah. And you go into any, like, specialization is something that happens after law school, largely.
Yep.
Not in law school. I mean, I can't. This is written, by the way, by a Janice Ruiz, who is a paralegal. I went to the about page of this website, ajs.org. And it's two people, apparently. It's Janice Ruiz, who wrote the article, and then it's Edward Gates, who is a retired corporate attorney. And they've been doing this blog, it looks like, since 2015. Are they like selling advertising, or what is even the point of this? I don't get it, because it's such bad advice.
It's wild. It's just completely made up. But if you're not familiar with anything about the LSAT, then sure. I mean, look at this oddly specific advice. Spend 70% of your study time on general LSAT prep and 30% on specialization-focused content. Huh? Like...
That's like they think the LSAT and the bar exam. I mean, I can see why if you were in law school, you might want to spend 70% of your time on general, like, bar related general legal knowledge that's going to help you to pass the bar, and then 30% on your specialized focused area. I mean, that kind of might make sense, but like specialization, like you're going to focus on intellectual property LSAT?
It's not possible.
That's not a thing. There's no logic games about intellectual property. There's no logical reasoning that is about intellectual property. I guess there might be reading comprehension passages that are about intellectual property.
Listen to this.
But it's just not even possible to follow this advice. What the fuck is this?
Tailor your LSAT study plan to focus on areas relevant to your specialization. If you're into environmental law, emphasize understanding complex texts, as laws and regulations can be intricate. It's weird. This is why Eric thought that this sounds like AI generated content. It's like the sentences flow, but they have no basis in reality. And I don't know. Why did this person post it?
Yeah, well, then here we see what might be the actual end game. It's kind of buried, though.
Yeah.
There's a link here. It says, seeking expert advice is a smart move in your LSAT preparation. Consider enrolling in LSAT prep courses like those offered by juristeducation.com. They provide specialized training and resources tailored to your specific law interests. Their services include JD admissions, pre-law advising, LSAT prep, law school transfers, LLM admissions, GRE prep, if you want to just go in a completely different direction, bar exams, and then MPRE. I don't know, man. I'm here to tell you that as an LSAT expert, this is totally bullshit. And that it's just not even a thing. It's not even possible that you can do this. I mean, it also says stupid things later, like, law schools pay close attention to your LSAT score because it's a good predictor of how well you'll do in law school. That's true. For example, top law schools often look for scores from 160 to 170 out of 180. What now? Because the top law schools are Harvard, Stanford, Yale. If you're scoring between 160 and 170, you do not have great chances of getting into those top law schools. I mean, those top law schools are looking for LSAT scores between 170 and 180 out of 180, not 160 to 170 out of 180.
Yeah.
Like, I suppose you might give yourself some chance at Harvard, Stanford, Yale with a 162, but it's a small ass chance. And even a 169 is not a very good chance at those schools. So what are you even talking about?
Yeah, they must like put these articles out and then people pay them to name drop them. Yep.
Is that what it is? Like, this is a
be.
paid advertisement for something called juriseducation.com.
Yeah, because this this blog, we are a blog that talks about different law related topics. We focus primarily on the business side of law, including technology and innovation in the legal field. We've been around since 2015, as you mentioned, so we have an extensive archive of articles to choose from. Learn more at our blog. It's like that little introduction too just sounds AI generated. I read words that make sense but don't make sense. Anyways, Eric, thanks for sharing this. Why the heck or where the heck did you find it and why? But he said he put it into ChatGPT and asked directly about the article's suggestions. And thankfully, ChatGPT immediately shot it down, pointing out that the LSAT tests you on broadly applicable skills, not specialized knowledge.
Well, I think it's time to update the scoreboard. This is definitely a turd of, not a pearl of wisdom, but a turd of wisdom. A turd of non-wisdom.
Filled with turds, right? It's just like nonsense.
Oh, if I could give it more than one turd, I would, but I can't because the committee would not allow it. So it's 26 pearls now, 76 turds, and 26 ties in the history of pearls versus turds. So we got bad advice outrunning good advice by like 3-1. If you've got a pearl versus turd candidate, please let us know at thinkinglsat.com or find us on social at thinkinglsat.
Excellent.
Jesus Christ, that's bad. The internet is getting worse. I'm here to tell you, I think the internet is getting worse. I think that the algorithms have officially fucked us. Like, we're the fact that so much content is generated just for Google, like, I think we need to get serious about disinformation. Like, I think that's a huge threat.
Yeah. So there's disinformation out there that's produced by malicious actors, right? Trying to sway elections or whatever. But then you're saying there's this whole other capitalistic, maybe driven content that's just there to try to get clicks. And it doesn't care about the quality of the content. It's just trying to maximize its visibility.
Oh, these people are selling LSAT prep and they clearly do not. It's like they've never even seen the LSAT before.
Yeah.
I mean, like this, that's just like a really dangerous. I mean, dangerous. I'm not going to make you sick, but it's just nonsensical. I mean, it's not even advice that you could possibly follow, but the Google algorithm is going to latch onto that. And then people are going to go click through and get one of their free consultations and talk to some schmo who doesn't know anything about the LSAT. Yeah. And, who maybe scored 165 on the LSAT and is going to now become your LSAT guru.
Yeah.
But yeah, that ain't getting you into the top law schools. I'm sorry. There's no such thing. You cannot specialize your LSAT prep to focus on a particular area of law practice. It's like, this is the type of dumb shit that people say, when I tried it, like people say, what do you do? And I'm like, oh dear God, I'm a teacher. Okay. What do you teach? I teach the law school admission test. Oh, so you know everything about the law. I need to tell, like they start asking you for legal consultation. No. I got a cousin who is
trying to get out of their lease. It's like,
I'm like, I did go to law school. I never practiced law. I don't want to practice law. I don't particularly know anything about the law. And if I had, I would have learned it in law school, not on LSAT prep. LSAT prep has absolutely nothing to do with the law. It's not a test of knowledge. It's a test of logic and English. And this idea that you can somehow like specialize your LSAT prep to focus on immigration or whatever is just not at all a thing. That is,
if you wanted to do this in any way, shape, or form, you actually could go to LSAT Daemon, go to the drilling section, click on the search tool, then search for questions that have the word environment in them.
But
and
you
then
could
do
also search for like bees or dinosaurs or, like inflation. I don't know. Like you could just search for common topics, but the topic is never relevant. They're testing your ability to read. They're testing your logical skills.
Oh, and
They're
the
not
information is
ever-
completely like not based in reality, right? Well, not completely, but almost. So when they say something about the environment, they may say the world is actually getting colder. That's because they're testing your ability to evaluate the logic of the argument, not
Right.
the underlying truth of the claims.
Yeah.
Anyways,
if this gets back to Janice Ruiz, I'm sorry for, completely dunking on you, but I would love to know the background of this. Yeah. It seems like you just have no clue whatsoever about LSAT prep, but you have created a piece on the internet that with a headline about LSAT prep. And that's what we're experts in.
yes.
So,
Okay. Well, this next email is from Hannah. The subject is LSAT score addendum.
says, hey, Ben and Nathan, loved the demon. Thank you. Went from a diagnostic score of around 150 to a final score of 174. Took the LSAT in June, got a 162. August, got a 163. And October, got a 174.
Wow,
Should I write a
that's
score
incredible.
addendum for this disparity? For schools that require a score addendum, what should I say? I did have issues with Prometric in August and didn't score as well as I should have. I had a notification glitching the entire time and Proctor interrupting me in the chat. I didn't ask to retake it, and I didn't cancel the score as it wasn't lower than my first test, and I worried schools would assume that it was, which is you're way overthinking it there, Hannah. It's higher, so you should keep it. Who cares what schools aren't getting in, trying to get inside the school's head on like what they will think a cancel means. They don't give a shit. They're just it's just not a score. That's all. There's nothing more than that.
Yep.
Now, if you had like 5 cancels in a row, they might start thinking that I don't know what they would think, but I could see how multiple cancels might look bad, but one cancel, they're just going to go, oh, so something went wrong. Hannah continues. Even if I explain the middle score being low, that doesn't address the 10-point disparity between the first and the last. In truth, I just studied more to get there. Is that too simple of an answer to include in an addendum? Any advice is appreciated. Best, Hannah.
Okay, I think the easiest answer to all these questions, when you're required to provide them, when you're not required to provide them, don't.
Yeah.
But when you are, just say, my practice test scores indicated that I could do better, so I took the test again. Now, in this particular case, I don't think it would hurt to mention there was a problem with the proctoring tool, but I would keep it really short and just say, hey, there was a glitch with the proctoring system, so I ended up retaking. That also works. The point is you just need to answer the question and move on.
Yeah, and I wouldn't like explicitly lie, but I think that you can craft it in such a way that if they were going to have any takeaways, they would go, oh, so yeah, the student's practice test scores were higher. She knew she could do better. She took it again. And, if you mention, like Ben said, keep it real brief, but if you mention proctoring issues, I think that the reader might naturally attribute the proctoring issues to both your June and August exam. I don't think you need to be like overly descriptive to give them the impression that like, oh no, I had a perfect experience in June when I got my 162. And then I got fucked by the proctors in August.
Well, here's the thing. I think you're almost doing the same thing that Hannah did, and that's you're overthinking the mindset of the reader. I think they're really looking here for other information. I got this idea from you, right? Like, oh, I got accommodations or something like that.
Yeah, they're seeing if you will disclose that you got accommodated. I think that's why they ask you this question, yes.
So I think if you talk about your practice test scores or you talk about the glitch, I think it's over. I think they're just gonna be like, what? Like, it's really looking for something much more juicy or informative or whining, right? Like that doesn't look good.
Oh yeah. Right.
casting
Blaming
blame
or like disclosing that you had a substance abuse problem or that you
Yeah.
had family issues that were interfering with your whatever, or, anything. Like, just don't put bad shit.
Yep. Just keep it short and simple and very product oriented. And but what I mean by that is your LSAT score is a product. It's something that you produced. How did you get there? You took practice tests and you studied for the test. Just keep it very professional and just focused on the core issue. And then that's a win. That's a win because it's everyone else who needs to divulge everything that's going to mess themselves up. Cool.
Is there anything wrong with like doing a slight fudge here and just saying that you had proctor issues, so you retook it a third time?
No, I don't think, well, that's accurate.
Right. I mean, it's like you're allowing the reader, though, to infer that you had proctor issues on the first exam as well. But no, I mean, it's a fact that you had proctor issues.
Yeah, I guess it depends on how you word it, but you're people ask questions all the time, and people often respond by answering part or only some of the question. If they want further clarification, they can ask for it. There's nothing
I knew
wrong
I
with
could do
that.
better, so I took it again.
What do you want to know more? Like, I think they're really I think they're done with you at that point because they're looking for something much more juicy.
Yeah. Why would they ever ask you that question? Like, what possible, why do they give a shit?
Yeah.
And I think the reason why they give a shit is that more and more people seem to be getting accommodated. And when they see a 10-point jump, they might start thinking, oh, well, that was the difference between having 35 minutes a section and 53 or 70 minutes per section. And they're not allowed to ask you that question, but they can ask you a different question that then could result in you accidentally disclosing that information. And so, I think if it's a required thing, like if the school says, hey, if you improved by more than X points, you have to write an addendum telling us why. I think you just say something along the lines of, my practice test scores indicated I could do better, so I took it again. And if you say also, I had some issues with Prometric, I think that's fine.
Yep.
Keep it short. Cool. We have a question here from Anonymous asking for our opinion on WashU's redacted review option. And then we have a quote here from WashU's application.
Okay. The application reads, the redacted review option is part of WashU's mission to make law school more attainable and is recommended for applicants who believe their personal achievements and background are superior to their undergraduate academic credentials or test scores. Okay.
It's a bad comma there after attainable.
Where is it attainable? Oh, yes, it is. That's a bad comma. You need a subject after that comma.
And Google Docs is highlighting it for us. So it's like, it's a bad comma that they didn't, maybe they disagree. Okay.
Yep. The redacted items will not be considered when the file is reviewed by the admissions committee, but will be reviewed and considered for scholarship awards.
That's another bad comma after committee. I used to do these bad commas all the time, and I think I still do. Abigail editing me has caused me to take some of those out, or at least now I notice when I'm writing and I see the fucking red squiggly line. I'm like, oh, okay, maybe I need to not put that comma. Anyway.
No, I did the same thing. Ross Guberman helped purge those from me for a long time. Anyways, additionally, while redacted from the admissions committee, a test score is required due to ABA requirements. Okay. Wow.
So the American Bar Association requires a test. It doesn't have to be the LSAT. It has to be a test.
Mm-hmm.
And that also might be going away eventually, right? Isn't that a thing that was in progress where the committee and then the other subcommittee and then they were voting on it? Whatever happened to that?
I don't know what happened to that. Nothing happened of it, I guess. It's still in place.
There's always these big news, like all this shit's going to happen. It's all going to change. And then like 5 years later, nothing has happened. That's interesting. So, okay. So you have to have an LSAT.
You have to have
a test score. Otherwise you can't be admitted to an ABA accredited school.
So they're saying, look, you got to submit this, even though we're in theory,
but we're going to hide it from the admissions committee.
Interesting. Okay. So, what can you redact? You can either choose to redact nothing. You can redact your GPA only. You can redact GRE and GPA. It doesn't have the word only after that, which is kind of funny. Redact GRE only. You can redact your LSAT and GPA or your LSAT only. Huh. So you can't redact
LSAT and GRE.
Yeah, like if you took them both and failed both, like one of those is going to get exposed.
But maybe that's just an oversight that they never even considered the possibility that someone might have taken both the GRE and the LSAT.
Yeah, or they need to set up their logic game better. Okay, whatever. So if they do in reality redact these things, right? I'm assuming that they actually do. The admissions committee gets them. I mean, you are signaling to the admissions committee that you don't think you did well on these metrics. So, for example, if you redact your GPA only, you're suggesting that you're below their 50th percentile, maybe their 25th percentile, right? So even though they're admitting you, quote, unaware of what GPA you have, they're probably assuming that you have a GPA that's lower than the 25th percentile, especially if you keep your LSAT score, right? Then you're someone who's savvy enough to know that your LSAT score is maybe good for the school, but your GPA is not. So are they really evaluating you blind? And do they even care about those numbers? I mean, once you're below the 25th percentile or once you're below the 50th percentile, does it make that much of a difference? Maybe they have all the information they need.
If you went to Princeton and you majored in something impressive and, I could see an application where you redact everything, but you've got like the pedigree. And I could see potentially getting admitted. But then it will, though, all the redacted shit will be reviewed and considered for scholarship awards.
Yeah, so presumably you're not getting scholarship awards, which means you're signaling too that, hey, I'm willing to pay full price here.
No, but they will. No, they do review the redacted items for scholarships.
They do, but if you're concerned about your numbers, then presumably they're not great, and presumably, therefore, you're not going to get much, if any, scholarship.
Right. The only reason to redact would be if you have a bad GPA, bad LSAT, bad GRE. Like if it's lower than their numbers, then I guess maybe you should redact. But like, what's your upside there? They're going to admit you. Then when you negotiate the price, which is what the scholarship award thing is, right? Which I really still, Ben, we got to go back to calling these things discounts instead of scholarships. Scholarships makes it sound like you're getting something. You're never getting anything. You're getting a discount.
It sounds fancy and respectable and nice. No. This is a coupon.
And it sounds like, oh, that's an optional thing. Like, most people don't get scholarships, but that's bullshit. At a school like WashU, I mean, if you're not there on a scholarship, I don't know what you're doing with your life. Let me look up. I'll look up their latest 509 here. I'm going to lsatdemon.com/scholarships. Just because that's an easy way to get to all the 509 reports. So I'm clicking the little PDF logo out to the right side on WashU. WashU, by the way, is ranked right now tied for 20th with Georgia in US News rankings. And they are one of the schools that really is out there fishing for high LSAT. That school, 95% of there's 744 students at the school, Ben. Of the 744, 710 of them are getting some kind of money. I mean, some kind of a discount.
Yeah.
And those discounts can be very big. Full tuition, 11%. More than full tuition, another 11%. So there's 22% that are paying nothing at all or even getting a check. And then another 59% that are getting somewhere between half and full discounted. That's insane. That's fucking crazy, Ben. If you add that up, it's 81% of the school that's paying something less than half price to go to that school. Like the tuition at WashU is fictional. Point is, you know, they're right outside the top 14, and they have for years tried to recruit based on LSAT and GPA. Eric helpfully provided their link to the link to lsd.law, law school data. It's all self-reported data, but it looks pretty robust. It looks pretty legit. And applicants for the class of 2026 matriculating this year, 2023. So for the class that just started at WashU in St. Louis, there's an LSAT versus GPA matrix, and it shows green dots for people that were admitted, yellow dots for people that were waitlisted, red dots for people that were just denied. If you look at the red dots, it's almost exclusively below, you know, it's just like right below their median LSAT and also right below their median GPA. And there's just these like pretty straight lines of if you're below on both, if you're below on either, you know, you're increasing your chances of getting denied. Then when we look at the green dots, it's just like so shocking. You get to see that there's just a vertical line that pops out for people who got exactly 173?
173.
And then there's also a pretty stark vertical line
or horizontal
on GPA, you know, if you're right at their median GPA.
Yep.
Or right above their median GPA, you're clearly getting in. So like this whole thing of like redacting, I mean, okay, you're allowed to do this, but is it actually affecting your admissions chances?
Well, I don't think it is at all. I think this graph proves it actually, because what this graph says is that they accept splitters. So if you're above their 50th percentile for GPA, you're probably in. And I had that backwards. But anyways, you can have LSAT scores that go from 173 all the way down to 151. But you're above their 50th percentile for GPA. And same for LSAT. If you're above their 50th percentile for LSAT, you can have GPAs that start at 4.0 or even higher and then go all the way down to 2.41. So what's happening here? People are saying, oh, I don't like my GPA, so I'm going to redact that. Well, if your LSAT score is above their 50th percentile, they're saying, we don't give a fuck. Look at all the people we're accepting who are above in the LSAT, but below, way below on GPA, we're still accepting them. So they're this is a harsh word, but it seems like they're pretending to review these applicants with an unbiased mind, but they have the information they need. The only people they're not going to know anything about are the people who redact both LSAT and GPA. But for those folks, they're just going to assume that they're below on both, and so they're not going to accept them.
Right. What motivation would they possibly have? I mean, or maybe you do get in and you're the one person, you're in the 5% of people who are paying their completely fictional tuition.
Yeah, they roll the dice. They're like, well, hey, their scores may be bad, but whatever. We'll offer them a full. We'll offer them zero money.
A Princeton bachelor's, right?
I just don't know how important that is.
If they were ever going to make the exception, it would be for some legacy reason, or it would be like, wow, like I can see a candidate who has an amazing, like, let's say they're 32 years old and they've actually done some amazing work shit.
Sure.
And maybe they have a bachelor's that's like, okay, like this person has a pedigree. You can tell that they have a pedigree.
Yeah.
And maybe they give signals of like also being wealthy or something. And I could see the school just being like, okay, we can admit you because like I know that you are a professional person. You have this undergraduate from Princeton. Like I'm willing to take a chance on you. But also, by the way, when this gets to our scholarship committee, you're going to be 1 out of 20 who isn't getting any kind of a discount.
Or if you secretly and foolishly hid your numbers from us and they're actually good, well, we still have the option to offer you scholarship money once we see those numbers. So There's no
right, which
downside.
I'm pretty sure they would. Yeah,
Yeah.
like redacting it isn't going to do. Yeah, it's just not going to do anything. I mean, I think it hurts you if anything because they probably, for most of the people who redact, they just go, "Oh, okay, well then it's a no."
Yeah, it's a no.
Yeah,
And it's weird that your well, I don't think your theory is weird, but it's interesting that your theory is that they would accept people on the basis of pedigree, because the first sentence in this application says the redacted review option is part of WashU's mission to make law school more obtainable. That sounds like more obtainable for people who are first gen, who don't have access to these sort of, high ranked schools. But
sure. They want, no, well, let's be real. They're doing this because they want your application.
Yep. This is just it's a tactic, right? Yeah, that's what it is.
Look, what are the incentives? Schools have strong incentives to get your application. They want your application. They don't care how good your application is. They just want your application.
Yeah, this is going to make, you're absolutely right. This is going to make people feel good about applying.
Yeah.
Who would otherwise just say, I'm not in the right. Like, oh, no, you have a chance. This is basically a sophisticated way of saying you have a chance.
No application fee, by the way. And late, yeah, sure.
Wait, no application fee. Did I misread that? Where did it say that?
Right at the top of their 509.
Oh, at the top of their 509. Okay, yeah. Yep. So they're just like trying to open the floodgates.
They deny 82% of the people who apply to their school. Right? So you have a 4 out of 5 chance of being denied at WashU when you apply, and that's good for them. That helps to raise their ranking, right?
Wait, how many are denied?
They're trying to have a better LSAT profile, a better GPA profile, and they're trying to deny as many applicants as they can because that raises their prestige. So when they say stupid shit like, oh, don't worry about it, we want to expand access and blah, 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 and you can apply without an LSAT, or, you can redact it from our admissions committee. Oh, I mean, you do still have to have one, and we will still show that to our scholarship committee.
Because when the money matters, we're not going to be foolish.
Right. When we start talking about price, then we are going to care. Like, you're not allowed to redact it when we start talking about price.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, it's like, look, it's a win-win for them because they could be like, oh yeah, no, we're going to deny 99% of the people who apply this way. And then of the 1% of people that they might make an exception for, obviously I'm making up the numbers, but I'm just thinking about what a rational actor would do in their shoes. In the 1% where they're going to actually accept somebody, then they're going to look at the LSAT and the GPA. And if the LSAT and the GPA are, as predicted, not good enough, then they're going to say, here's our tuition is $64,488 a year plus $716 a year of annual fees. So we're looking at north of $65,000 a year times 3 to go to this school.
Plus living expenses and everything else on top of that. So
it is St. Louis, so it's cheaper. But they yeah, I mean, you're going to graduate with $250,000 in debt, easy. And you're going to be one of the only people who borrowed that money. Like, again, 19 out of 20 people are paying something less than full price.
Wow. Okay.
I can't wait until our roll call tool. By the way, we've talked about this on the podcast before, but we are working on our roll call tool, and you will be able to soon at lsatdemon.com visualize these numbers in a slightly different way, where you're going to see at a school like WashU, you're going to see that there are 5 out of 100 people who aren't getting a discount.
Yep.
And there are 19 out of 20 people who are getting a discount, including 22 out of 100 people who are getting full or more than full.
Wait, you said 19 out of 100 or 19 out of what? Sorry.
So I said 22 out of 100 who are getting full or more than full.
Yep.
There are 5 out of 100 who are paying full price.
Yep.
And there are, again, an additional 59 out of 100 who are getting a discount somewhere north of 50%. And again, adding that all up, it's 81% of the class that's getting something more than 50% discount. So yeah, 19% that are paying as much as half price.
Yeah. So when we have this tool rolled out, you'll see a bunch of people
Visually.
sitting in a class, and you can see what percentage of them are going for free and what percentage of them are paying the full price and what percentage of them are paying something in between.
Right.
And it's like, okay, imagine you're going to be in that class. Where do you want to sit?
Well, this shit should go on the 509, right? Like I'm looking at this 509 report, which is American Bar Association section 509. It's explicitly meant as a consumer protection report. Like the reason why this exists is because the American Bar Association was like, wow, we really got to show people what they're getting themselves into here.
Yeah.
Because of shit like this, where you could be 1 out of 20 who's actually paying full price and no one else is paying anything close to full price, but you are. So there's this, it's a consumer protection measure, but when the schools produce their actual reports, this table of grants and scholarships is buried down on not the first page, not the second page, but way down on the third page of this report is the most important information, which has something to do with, telling you what price people are paying. And the visualization is going to take this table and it's going to turn it into like, oh, I see what's going on at this school.
You know what? I'm wondering if schools now use the scholarship estimator to see what their competitors are likely to do.
Could be. Yeah. Who knows? If you want to dig more into this, go to lsatdemon.com/scholarships. You can put in your LSAT, your GPA. There's a checkbox there for URM, and you can just play around with the numbers and see what kinds of offers you are likely to get at various schools. It is just an estimator, not a, predictor. We can't make any kind of guarantees. And there's lots of ways that you can get results that are not, as good as what the predictor might estimate.
Yeah.
That said, we did have an email. Is this a good place for it?
Yeah, let's read it.
From Tanya?
It's from
Tanya.
Kelsey. Mm-hmm.
From Kelsey.
Yep.
I'll let you read it.
Okay. Subject is scholarship estimator is accurate. Hi, Ben and Nathan. I followed all of your advice and used the Demon for my LSAT prep. I put my 4.03 UGPA, that's her undergraduate GPA, and my 173 LSAT in the scholarship estimator, and I used the data from the estimator to apply broadly in September. It is now November, and I have already heard all of the offers from my top choices. Your estimator had 100% accuracy for every school I applied to, and I'm excited to tell you guys I will be attending UCLA next fall. You guys made me fall in love with the LSAT, and I still do time sections just for fun. I never want to stop playing with the LSAT, and I'm grateful to the both of you for truly helping your students. Best, Kelsey. Wow, I don't expect the estimator to be 100% accurate, in part because we're looking at last year's data, right? So we're just saying, okay, what happened last year with someone who had similar numbers? This is how they likely performed. What does that mean for this year? We don't necessarily know, but this is interesting because, the US News and World Report rankings have changed their formula, and everybody was like, how is that going to affect GPA and LSAT numbers and what effect they have on people's chances of getting admitted, as well as their chances of getting scholarship money. And we're like, we don't know. We're just going to have to wait and see. But here's one person who's saying, last year's numbers seem to predict this year's performance pretty well, at least so far.
Yeah. And at the end of 2023, we will get new 509 reports. I'm looking now at UCLA's 509 report, which was generated on December 28th of last year. And so, presumably at the end of this year, we'll get new 509 reports that give us new scholarship matrices. We'll then update the estimator so that we can try to give you as close, close of an estimate as we possibly can. But the more things change, the more they stay the same, right? Like the game, again, it always seems like the game's going to change. But the truth is they need thousands of students at these schools and they need millions of dollars worth of tuition. And they are fighting in the LSAT or the US News rankings, and they're trying to get as high as they can in those rankings. It's interesting that UCLA comes up right after WashU because those are definitely competitor schools. Okay,
Yeah.
those are both schools that try to recruit from across the country. They are desperately trying to be in the top tier, right? They really want to be in the top 14. And we have so UCLA right now is listed at 14. They have dropped out of the top 14 before. What do they do to try to stay inside the top 14? Well, again, go to lsd.org and take a look at UCLA. You're going to see the same kinds of stark lines where they're just, admitting people that are above their median LSAT, admitting people that are above their median GPA, and they are aggressively they're looking to give scholarships to attract the most promising applicants. If you look at their like LSAT percentiles and their GPA percentiles, UCLA and WashU are strikingly similar. Look, I'll just do LSAT, okay? WashU, 50th percentile, 172, 75th percentile, 173. UCLA, 50th percentile, 171, 75th percentile, 172. Interesting that they have a slightly lower LSAT profile at UCLA.
Yeah.
Median GPA 3.9 at UCLA, 3.94 at WashU. So yeah, WashU is just like nipping on the heels of UCLA.
Yeah.
And they are aggressively, both schools are aggressively offering scholarships. UCLA gives 85% of their admittees are getting some scholarship help. But UCLA doesn't need to give nearly as much scholarship as many full tuition scholarships because full tuition 4%, more than full tuition 2%, and then half to full is only 20%. So at UCLA, 26% of the class is getting a 50% or more discount. And that number at WashU was 81%.
Wow.
Well, that's the difference between living in Brentwood and living in fucking St. Louis. That's a big, big difference in lifestyle. Anybody who has ever been to the UCLA campus or felt Los Angeles weather would probably prefer, if all else were equal, to be on the west side of Los Angeles. And if you've ever been to St. Louis, you've been to St. Louis. So like there's an additional game that's going on there with scholarships, with bidding for applicants. But okay. Anyway, back to that email. I'm glad to know it was accurate. It's not accurate for everybody, but it's as accurate as we can make it.
Yep. Great.
Cool.
So let's, okay. So we need to go back, I guess, a couple emails here. We have one from Hannah. The subject is application timing.
Yeah, we got a couple questions. Both of these are about gap years. So Hannah says, hello, Ben and Nathan. I've been talking to attorneys and some current law students, and over half of them have emphasized the importance of working before applying to law school. I worked throughout high school and college. When I was a senior in high school, I volunteered at a nonprofit legal aid office, and I worked there full time once I graduated. I know that law is what I want to pursue, but I'm nervous that my application could be better with more experience and that a potential gap could give me more time to work on my LSAT score. What do you recommend? Do you want to read Christian's as well?
Yeah, let's do it.
Christian has a subject here that says gap year or master's program, ?
Okay. Hello, I'm currently a 29-year-old undergraduate trying to decide if I should get a master's degree or take a gap year. I've already started studying for the LSAT and plan to take it in August. My GPA is a 3.4, but I also have significant work experience as I was in the military. All of my degrees will be paid for, but I'm debating if it would be more beneficial to pursue a master's in poli-sci or history or move back home with my parents to save up money while working. Which would be better in your opinion?
The latter.
Yeah, if you want to go to law school, a master's is not going to help you. It doesn't help your GPA. They don't consider it when they're considering your numbers. So you're just spending time and money on something that does not even help a legal practice, right?
What the fuck is what is a master's in poli-sci or a master's in history?
Oh,
that reminds me of my master's in journalism, which is like does absolutely no good for anybody.
No,
Like,
it's a
it
business
would be
model.
good if I wanted to teach at community college. That's what it would be good for.
Yep, that's what it would be good for. But the thing about it is, right, conducting a class is a cheap endeavor. Schools are very good at it. They hire people, they then conduct a class, and they can charge a shit ton of money for a bunch of people to sit down and within one semester get in another batch of students. So it's just a business.
It is just a business, especially these master's programs. I think that they are pretty shameful money grabs. Like, who are you impressing with a master's in, unless it's in something technical? What is what is it possibly for? Like, unless you're going to be a teacher, to teach at maybe a fancy high school, or to teach at, again, like a community college, I think a master's could qualify you for that. But otherwise, I mean, yeah, no, it is only barely on the margins. Might it help you with your law school application? I mean, the answer, really, I'm saying 99% not going to help you at all.
Well, it's the help that you get, if any, is definitely not going to be worth the cost in time and money.
And it's not going to be like you're not going to get a scholarship because of it, right? It's the kind of thing where if you're, because Christian's GPA is not great with a 3.4. If you also had a 160 or something, now you're a very pedestrian candidate where you're going to get denied at the top schools. But there might be some regional school where they look at your 3.4 and your 160 and they go, wow, we got a lot of applications with 3.4 and 160 on them. And if you're right on the edge, then they might look at that master's and go, oh, well, look, this person has recent educational, they just recently successfully paid for and completed a master's program. And it might make you more attractive to get admitted just barely on the margins. And I guess for Christian, if the military is going to pay for the JD anyway, then Christian doesn't care about the money as much. But still, if you're going to pay for, I guess Christian also isn't going to pay for the master's. It says all of my degrees will be paid for by the military. So, yeah, I guess you could get Uncle Sam to pay for a worthless poli-sci or history master's.
But it still would be better to put your effort into the LSAT.
It would be much better to put your effort into the LSAT. As far as moving home with your parents to save money while you're working, if you can stomach it, and if it's not going to ruin the relationship that you have with your parents, then yeah, that sounds like an excellent plan, because law school is time consuming, expensive. You're going to need money for LSAT prep, law school, living expenses, clothes, like bar prep. There's a lot of expenses to try to become a JD.
Yeah, and if you do an unpaid job or internship your first year, or the summer after your first year, you're not getting money then. Some people do unpaid work both after their first year and after their second year. So you have to finance your life.
What do we okay, so Christian, you should work, you should get a better LSAT, you should save money.
Yep.
Do not do one of these dumb master's programs. Hannah is asking about, do you think Hannah should take a gap year?
Well, yeah. So it looks like she has two motivations, right? I know that law is what I want to pursue, but I'm nervous that my application could be better with more experience, work experience, and that a potential gap could give me more time to work on my LSAT score. I think both of those things are reasons to take a gap year, but I think your LSAT score is astronomically more important than the more work experience. That said, I think Hannah, like a lot of people, is looking at the more work experience to improve her application. But I think there's this hidden benefit, and that is you go out there and get more experience and maybe decide that law school isn't for you. I know you know that law is what you want to pursue now, but we all change, and maybe that work experience will expose you to something more interesting more exciting. And boy, that would be a win in itself.
Beautiful.
Cool. Last email here is from Tanya.
This is a weekly shout out that we have been doing at the end of every show.
Oh, cool. And so a listener wrote in a shout out?
Or Eric put it in. Anyway, it says, in 2014, LSAC denied my accommodation request. LSAC's reason at that time was that I did not have any documented history on my ADHD condition going back to K through 12 or college. I'm 55 years old, and this just wasn't a thing back then. After discussions with the psychologist that performed my 3-day evaluation back in 2014, apparently there are several studies that show that women and girls often go undiagnosed more than boys. That's not surprising. I mean, I would bet that underrepresented minorities also go undiagnosed more than white people do.
For sure. Yep.
One of the main reasons for this misdiagnosis is that women/girls present symptoms as inattentive, whereas boys typically present as hyperactive. Well, yeah, I mean, I don't think that that's how they are presenting. I think that that's how they're being perceived. But
well, you actually have, those are two different symptoms, right, of ADHD. And you can be on a spectrum for each of them. And I think what she's saying is that boys tend to be higher on the spectrum for hyperactivity and girls tend to be higher on the spectrum for inattentiveness, which may not be as noticed, right?
Yeah, you're not, but I want to return to that sounds like semantics to me. That if you've got a girl in front of you who's struggling with whatever little test you're giving her, you might say, oh, she's just not paying attention. Whereas boys, you might, for whatever reason, you might choose to describe it as hyperactivity. And so what I'm saying is, I think the gender of the student is impacting the diagnosis itself.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, if it's an actual diagnosis.
Even though I struggled with reading comp, studying for tests, etc., I still managed to get good grades. No teacher or professor or school counselor or coach ever thought I had any issues. After this LSAC denial, I put it out of my mind until my tutoring sessions this past summer with the amazing Allah. Many kudos and a super shout out to Allah for recognizing my difficulties and turning me on to Brandon. Allah relayed how the LSAC is approving accommodations requests, so I resubmitted my request, and after approximately 40 business days, my request was approved. Jesus Christ, 40 business days. So 8 weeks, 2 months? I don't know why it would take that long. In the past, says Tanya, I have taken the LSAT 4 times with a 144 score in 2014. Because of Allah and the demon, I was just starting to get my practice test scores consistently on average 157 before the accommodation. I'm hoping I can improve a bit more. I really appreciate Allah's work with me and correspondence with Brandon too. Thank you for everything you do, Tanya.
Yeah, well, a 157 before accommodations would probably increase significantly after accommodations.
Oh, I would think comfortably in the mid 160s. Yeah. The accommodations are over in video game terms, or we would call them OP, which stands for overpowered. I am pretty firmly committed to this idea based on seeing, hundreds of different students who have gotten these accommodations. When you go from a 35-minute test to a 53-minute test, or a 35-minute test to a 70-minute test, yeah, your performance increases quite a lot.
Well, think about the performance benefit you get from an extra 5 minutes, right? How many people are in the demon and they're like, oh, I was so close to being finished, so I just paused the test and I did a little bit more work. It's like, yeah, that little bit more work got you 5 more questions.
Oh, in 5 minutes, you could get a complete game or a complete reading comp passage, or, like you previously had time to read the passage, but you didn't have time to answer those questions. And now in 5 more minutes, you can answer all the questions. There might be 8 questions that accompany a reading comp passage, and you answer all 8 of those questions in your additional 5 minutes. Okay, so now imagine what it's like to get an additional 18 minutes or an additional 35 minutes Because the truth is, when you apply for accommodations, they give you whatever you ask for.
Yeah.
So if you ask for double time, you're going to get double time. And it's not fair. It's too much. I don't know where they came up with the default presumption that time and a half was a good amount of time to give people.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous. And the fact that somebody could get 70 minutes or, the other wild accommodations, like the ability to stop the clock whenever you want, or I don't know, like the accommodations are nuts. Like it is not fair.
Yeah.
It's not leveling the playing field. It's making it unfair for the people who get these accommodations. I think everybody who has a case for accommodations should apply for the accommodations. I'm not blaming you, but I'm telling you that the accommodations that you're going to get, they don't just level the playing field. They give you the advantage.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I'm glad, Tanya, that's a very lawyerly thing to do, to get denied in 2014 and then 9 years later to be reapplying and getting that accommodation. And, if you've got a diagnosis and you have now been approved for these accommodations, you've got at least one more crack at it. I think you probably have more than that, though. You took it 4 times way back in 2014. None of those are still they're not in the 5-year period. I think Tanya has 3 more chances at it. Would you agree?
Yeah.
Right? Well, 7-time lifetime max.
Yeah.
And that's without appealing.
Yep.
Which Tanya could clearly appeal as well.
Yep.
To say, hey, I was denied accommodations back in the blah, blah, blah. So if you need to take it an 8th time, Tanya, you could. Hopefully you'll never need to take it that 8th time, because you still have attempts 5, 6, and 7 to get through with your accommodations.
Well, it's weird too, because I think the history of these tests has been a little bit muddied. So some of these may not even be on our record anymore. Right? Like I remember some people like, oh, that test was removed from my record. So their 7-time max is affected by that if LSAT doesn't document it. I don't know. Anyways, thanks for listening. Be LSAT famous. Please ask questions or share news with us at Thinking LSAT. If you have questions about the LSAT Demon, email help@lsatdemon.com. You can also check out our other podcast, LSAT Demon Daily. That was episode 430 of the Thinking LSAT podcast. Thanks all y'all for listening. Nice knowing ya. Don't pay for law school.